I've heard from each of you three candidates, there is an increase in crime in Ward 2. What do you believe are the contributing factors, and what are your plans for restoring a sense of security and safety to the area?
You know, here in Ward 2, we're fortunate to live in a bedroom community where crime is not concentrated in any one area. It's not to say that things don't happen from time to time, but overall, Ward 2 enjoys a relatively crime-free reputation. As the only Ward 2 candidate who's a graduate of the Cranston Citizens Police Academy back in 2003, I'm fortunate to have a unique insight into our police department and the great men and women who protect our city. I spoke with Captain McGrath today and received an update on the crime statistics throughout the city. In order to get down to the street level, though, it would take a time-consuming manual review of a 115-page report that's coded in such a way that doesn't make it easy for a layman like myself to decipher the information. I hope to be analyzing that report a little bit more in the weeks to come. The department is looking for some new mapping software that will make pulling localized statistics as easy as surfing the web. And I support funding to allow this software and others designed to improve efficiency. The police department needs every tool that they can get to accurately analyze the data and pinpoint problems before they get to be very large problems. As I said in Ward 2, there's no real pattern of crime anywhere in the ward. Some of the bigger issues in Ward 2, there's some graffiti, things that are specifically labeled as tagging by gang members are handled by a gang unit. Graffiti has been especially prevalent in the Roll Square area and some of the playgrounds. I've noticed that a lot of shattered glass panes at bus shelters. I've been told that some loitering in the woods near Budlong Pool and the fields. Blight, I think, is an issue that can be correlated with crime in that it leads to crime. I mean, think of the broken window syndrome. Break a window, nobody takes care of it. Suddenly more windows are broken. Other things start to degrade within the neighborhood. And the overall quality of life in that neighborhood goes down. I think that the most effective way to combat this type of crime, this is low-level crime, we're not talking about murders or anything like that, is to have neighborhood groups in place. And as a matter of fact, I had a conversation with one of my neighbors just last week about putting one of those into effect out in Forest Hills. I think it's a very effective way to identify problems before they become bigger problems, then pass that information on to the authorities and let them deal with it based on the information they have, as well as other statistics that we're not aware of. So neighborhood groups, I think, is primarily the way that I would fight that, in addition to making the police department more efficient through better use of technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Amelia?
Thank you. I have a pretty good pulse on what goes on down there. Being president of Little League, I'm always down at Aqueduct Field, and I see a lot of kids and families down there. And I've noticed there is a better police presence. This past summer, the graffiti is an issue, and it's actually been down. I haven't seen much of it. Being new graffiti done, they do say that there's some in there are some in playgrounds and in schools, but property damage has also been down in Ward 2. There is an increase of police presence, making sure that they're going by the Budlong Pool and patrolling there, patrolling different areas. As far as the graffiti, though, what I would like to see is the city somehow finding a way so that we can get rid of the graffiti. Some of it has been out for quite a bit. And I mean, even if you're a business owner, I'm sure that there's graffitis in other areas of the city, and I don't think that it's fair to have a graffiti around, the business owners. But I know that business owners have been asked by law enforcement, and they've actually, have removed some graffiti. There's also a police presence at Cranston East, which I feel is is a place that needs to have police presence. They're there monitoring what goes on there, and as part of what I like to do is inform the constituents of Ward 2 exactly of what's going on. So they have a heartbeat of what kind of crime issues we're dealing with, and in case we do need to put together some kind of a crime watch. Another active role that I played was in sex offender notification. I've worked directly with Sergeant Walsh as far as making sure that these notifications get down and the resources are available to them so that communities, families in the community are aware of sex offenders living in their area.
Thank you, Amelia. Joe?
Thank you, Elizabeth. In regards to Ward 2, as most of you know, I do own Cranston Firearms on Cranston Street, which is in Ward 3. And this city recently has undergone a project which is going very well with the new Cranston Police Station. That's going to be a blessing for Ward 3. It's also going to be a blessing for the rest of Cranston. We need to keep in mind that these law enforcement gentlemen are from time to time underpaid and overworked, and it's very much a thankless job from time to time. I know this because I work closely with them. I supply them with a lot of their extra gear, their additional badges, their handcuffs, their keys, and their tactical gear. So I've gotten the opportunity to meet most of them. They're very concerned about some of the crime as well. However, we don't have crime, and I say crime is, we don't have the crime that they have in most of the other major cities in this country. The crime we're talking about are petty crimes, like both of my opponents have spoken about. The graffiti. In my opinion, there is a major graffiti problem. We need to stop this graffiti problem. What I would like to do, and there are federal funds that are available for this, the first thing the city needs to do is we need to hire a grant writer. We do not have a grant writer. This is something this administration has not done, is hire a grant writer. Hire a grant writer able to bring in the federal funds that are going to be available for the graffiti task force that I'd like to see implemented, not only in Ward 2, but also in the city. I also support having more police patrols. But as far as the funding that my opponent, Mr. Lucas, spoke about, who's going to take care of this extra funding because the taxpayers afford to actually pay for this again? Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Mark, if you would like, you have 30 seconds to rebut. Sorry, folks, we're dealing with the limitations of the site.
I thought for sure I'd be in the know. Well, Elizabeth, as you know, because you wrote the article on it, I've taken the step of trying to create a larger community group by putting together a community portal called ward2.org, try to get people together and talking about these things. To reply to my opponent, Mr. Castellone, there's plenty of funding in the budget. I think you can find it by creating more efficiencies and then diverting those funds to where they're needed most.
Thank you very much. Mark, hold on to the microphone. Question number 4 is for you. It's easy to propose an increase in parks and other recreational facilities as a means of serving our local kids. But how do you deal with the kids who don't naturally gravitate towards organized supports and after-school activities? Kids who spend their time in the streets, oftentimes creating a public nuisance. Where do skateboarders, stunt bikers, and other risk lovers fit into your vision for the community?
I think that we need to embrace all sorts of sports and after-school activities. Unfortunately, here in Ward 2, we're very compact. Everybody's house is virtually on everyone else's house. There's very little open space in Ward 2 that's left. I know one of my neighbors is very keen on getting a dog park in Ward 2. And unfortunately, I can't think of an area that we could provide the necessary space for something like that. Certainly, all types of sports need to be encouraged, and I think that certainly beyond the traditional sports that I played growing up, hockey, football, basketball, and the like. Very challenging within Ward 2 to find the space needed, not only the space needed, but the funds necessary to create some of these things to embrace kids who like extreme sports, for instance. It's a very good question, a very difficult question, as a matter of fact. I think that what I would do to try to alleviate that and try to find a solution to embrace all these folks is to get together with some of the neighborhood groups that are already in effect, try to solicit information from all the neighborhoods, Auburn Friendly, South Auburn, Auburn, Eden Park, and Forest Hills, and see what types of minimal open space is available that may or may not be used for something like this. I don't know any off the top of my head, certainly, but that doesn't mean that it's not out there. Very, very difficult proposition here in Ward 2. If I were in Ward 4, I'd have a totally different answer. I'd say, well, let's go ask this farmer and see what he says about allowing an ATV park or something that's a little less invasive. But we're not, and I can do all the wishing that I want. The fact is, we're in a very established neighborhood here in Ward 4, Ward 2. So you got me thinking about Ward 4. Here in Ward 2, and unfortunately, the open spaces just don't exist. So we have to be very, very creative in finding out what space is available and how we can use that to its maximum potential, so we can perhaps expand some of the after-school and recreational activities. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. Amelia?
Very good question. I have to agree with Mark there. And from talking to folks, the street, knocking door on door, there's been that issue. They said that there is organized sport for the younger kids, and it's very hard for a parent, both parents working, and they have a 14 or 15, 16-year-old son, daughter, that basically have nowhere to go. There is the youth center where we have to, make some events to attract that age group. And but as far as the extreme, the first thing that came to my mind is, the pool is a place that's opened up for the summer, and that wouldn't, stepping out of the box, there might be something that you can drain that pool and use it through the fall, somewhere where you can. And again, but with that also, we need to be aware that it's a facility that needs care, and that's one of the things that I know that I would want. It's in our ward, and we want to be proactive, and we can step out of the box and try to find other ways, other revenue streams that we can actually fund the pool to make some improvements in there. Again, to try to release the taxpayers of any undue burden. But I think that area there could be utilized to some degree. It could be made into a skateboard park during the fall, and then through the spring, and then it'll open up for the fall. For the summer, for the pool.
Thank you, Amelia. Joe?
Thank you, Elizabeth. The question stands, and I don't think the question's been answered the way I want to hear it. I have a son who is 17 years old. I have a stepson who's 17 years old. And the way to get kids involved is to stay involved with them and make sure that they're involved and they're safe. My son John, some of you know him, is involved in Boy Scouts, and he's coming up on his final year. He's going to complete Eagle Scouts. In this city, in this country, we've pretty much lost a sense of where our children should be going. So rather than sending them off on a skateboard, I want to send them off in the right direction. We need to also have some of the federally funded parks and playgrounds in the city, specifically in Ward 2. We need to somehow get together with the city council. Now, I do not know if this is possible, but from time to time, when we see the majority of the people that are in these parks and the playgrounds, they are not even children that live in Ward 2. They're coming from Providence. I have no problem with sharing my toys with children from Providence. However, that money was acquired from an administration that represented our city, and our taxpayers paid that administration at that time. I'm sure that most of you in the audience have also thought about this from time to time. I live on Moran Street, and right across the way, across over on Pontiac Avenue, is Dew Temple Elementary. We have a park there, a small park. There's also a large grassy knoll. I don't know if it's possible, but what I propose, having a business, is taking up some of that grass, having some concrete come in, having it smoothed over, and having possibly a small park there for some of the skateboarders. Again, I do not know if this is something that's possible because that was federal grant money to build those playgrounds that was acquired during the Traffic Candy administration, but it's a shame to see some of those parks go to the wayside and some of the children from Ward 2 cannot play in them because kids in Providence play in them. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Mark, if you'd like, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
I'd like to think that we, Cransonians as a whole, have been taxed enough, and that certainly there are efficiencies that could be had within the budget that could perhaps help free up funds to do the things that we'd like to do. And certainly, I would agree with Mr. Castellone that we have to make sure the children are doing the right things. I'm not an advocate of just sending them off on their way, but monitoring them and making sure the parents and folks are involved from day one.
Thank you, Mark. If you could pass it back to Joe. Next question is for you.
Thank you.
Residents in Ward 2 have expressed concern with minimum housing issues. Overgrown grass and weeds, houses in disrepair, and increasing graffiti, as was mentioned earlier, a growing rat population at Blackmore Pond, and so on and so forth. How do you plan on addressing these issues, and how will you ensure that these problems will be dealt with in an expedient fashion?
The key word is code enforcement in our city. We need to have enforcement on that level, on the city level. If I'm elected to be your city councilman, I will want to work closely with that part of the city to make sure that these things are addressed. Graffiti is an ugly thing in anyone's city, in anyone's town, anyone's neighborhood, in any place in our country. We need to also be aware from time to time people neglect their property. The idea that people neglect their property isn't just because they neglect their property, but it's probably because they're just absentee landlords. But however, that's not an excuse. As I've walked through Ward 2 with my wife and my family for the past 3 months, I've noticed a lot of graffiti. I've noticed a lot of overgrown bushes, especially on vacant lots. I've also noticed a vacant lot in the city of Cranston, particularly on Garden Street, that's a city-owned piece of property. And I've spent probably, well, my own 16 of my own hard-worked hours with my wife and the rest of the Protectorate Authority cleaning up that issue. We cannot continue to cast aspersions on people that own the property in the city of Cranston and get after them about cleaning up their lots when the city actually owns property in Ward 2 and they need to be responsible for that. So before we can guide them, we need to make sure that we're going to do the same thing. Again, we can create revenue in the city by assessing the people that do not want to take care of their property, specifically in Ward 2. This will create revenue for the city. This will also send a message to the people that Ward 2 is a lovely place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Mark, you have 2 minutes to respond.
You know, I stare at a blight and minimum housing problem. I see it almost every day when I walk down the street to get my newspaper. Domestic bank is a very big issue right now in Ward 2 in terms of minimum housing. They have a huge area where they knocked down 3 beautiful houses, ostensibly to make a large drive-through that extended 150 feet into the neighborhood. These types of projects are not appropriate for the ward and certainly should not go forward. Now that it hasn't gone forward, we have this giant dirt lot that really doesn't meet minimum housing standards. It's not being kept up to the same condition as other houses in the neighborhood. And right now we're at a standstill because there's not really meaningful penalties to go after some of these owners who are just basically sitting there and saying, I'm not going to do anything for you, and you're not doing anything for me, so we're at a standstill. There has to be meaningful penalties. There has to be the courage to enforce those penalties. And certainly extra attention needs to be made in the Blackmore Pond area. Rats are not tolerable in any way, shape, or form. We have issues with that with some of the food businesses on Reservoir Avenue, and then, of course, the proximity to the Pocasset River. Really what it all boils down to is having meaningful penalties and the courage to enforce them. And that's pretty much all I have to say on that.
Thank you, Mark. Amelia?
At one of the council meetings that I attended, there was a group there, Cranston, Concerned Citizens of Cranston. And what I saw there was a group of folks that are volunteers that have been trying to let the city council know of these issues of minimum housing, of just business upkeep. And because of this group, it's made me aware. Everywhere I travel in the ward, I start to see where there is a heavy problem with overgrown weeds in homeowners, and as well as in the streets. And one thing that I've done with being the president of the league there is work with volunteers. And we can't have volunteers that have fall on deaf ears. These are people that are willing to go out and spend time of their everyday life to go out and clean up areas of the city, particularly in our Ward 2. I think that's a contagious thing. I think that as a city council person, I would be behind people like this. I would get together with them, because from what I've heard at council meetings, there isn't enough sometimes manpower to enforce these. I mean, it's a tough. I mean, there is a lot of stress on the system. But I think with volunteers and with council person like myself willing to roll up my sleeves and address these issues, it galvanizes the rest of the folks in other areas, and we can do it one business at a time and one house at a time to make sure that Cranston looks beautiful again, because it's an eyesore to see this all around the city. But I think that there's people willing again to take their time and volunteer their time, and I value anybody who volunteers their time for this great city, because that's what it's all about.
Thank you, Amelia. Joe, you have 30 seconds to rebut if you like.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas, for agreeing with me. As far as volunteering goes, I volunteered my time for the past 2 years. And again, I don't want to sound redundant, but I've been to many of the cleanups in the city. I've been on Roll Street. I've actually picked up trash with a trash bag on my own with the rest of our organization. The volunteers do say they're going to show up. However, volunteers don't show up. We all know that. We've all been part of organizations where it's a volunteering group. However, volunteers do not show up. We need to implement.
Joe, I'm
Yes.
afraid you've got a red card.
Red card.
Red card.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Amelia, the final question is for you. Sort of ironic, because you actually brought this up earlier. Budlong Pool has long been considered one of the city's greatest assets. Do you feel it is being utilized to its fullest potential, and if not, what would you do to change that?
Budlong Pool, it's a great place for the Cranston families in that area. I mean, actually for the whole city, for the whole all the families that go there, and regardless of what the cost is to upkeep that pool, it's worth it to maintain that for all the families and the kids. That is something that we would have to address, make sure that we're proactive. One of the things that I do is step out of the box again, not the same old thinking of trying to make improvements, taking it out of the taxpayers, out of that same pie. I'd like to step out of the box. I mean, there's no reason why we can't, have a corporation wanting to maybe, want to put their name on the Budlong Pool to bring in some revenue there. There wouldn't be any other reason why we couldn't have some signage to bring in some revenue, because the pool needs upgrades. The pool was built in 1940, I think World War I, World War II. They just had to spend, I think, $4,000 to $5,000 to replace a filter that was gone. The pool was shut down for a few days, and I commend the city, I commend the workers, the building maintenance, everyone, the Parks and Recreation Department, that they went there and worked overtime to get that pool back and running again. And there wasn't much. I mean, there was not too many people suffering. Those were the hottest times of the summer. But I will say that is something that I will keep on the agenda. I would want to find ways to improve the Budlong Pool, because it's a quality of life there for the residents there, and that's something that we need to always keep working at to make sure that it's properly upgraded and maintained.
Thank you, Emilio. Joe?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Bottom line, years ago, Budlong Pool used to be mobbed with children and families. I think that's an issue. I think there should be an incentive for families to be more involved in the Budlong Pool. Because I believe right now there's a fee for Cranston residents to use the Budlong Pool. I think if you're a Cranston resident, you paid enough during the course of your lifetime. Your children should not have to pay a fee to go to the Budlong Pool. However, if you do not live in the city, we need to create revenue from people that do not live in the city and charge them a fee to use our pool. Taxpayers are paid enough. As far as creating revenue, I'm not sure if there's any federal grant money available for the pool, but however, I would be in favor of having some type of signage posted, as my opponent spoke about, to create some revenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Mark?
I think the Budlong Pool definitely is underutilized. I would love to see longer hours there. I'd like to see other events being held at the Budlong Pool, especially in conjunction with the huge fields aside there, perhaps a concert, some other kind of fair, something that's going to generate not only some revenue for the city, but some additional things for city residents to do, in the dog days of summer. I think the fee is very reasonable for a Budlong Pool. I believe it's $25 per family per year. More than that? I'm getting anything. Okay. 50? 50 is still a bargain, in my opinion. Cost me $150 for the pool for my kids. And it's nowhere near as big, as they tell me all the time. I still think $50 is very reasonable, $50 per family per year for a Cranston resident. That's one of the best bargains going on out there. I'd like to remind Mr. Castellone that all this federal grant money he talks about getting, it's not free money. We pay for that in our taxes. I don't think that's something that we should use as a crux. Certainly we need to find ways to better manage our city. And finding ways to better manage our city and budget more efficiently is going to allow us to do the things we need to do to make this an even better city to live in. So I just learned today that there's a huge concert at McCoy Stadium in my hometown of Pawtucket, my original hometown of Pawtucket. And I was amazed to see Bob Dylan there. I mean, blew my mind. Unbelievable. Certainly, we're not going to have Bob Dylan playing the Budlong Pool or the Taco Bell Budlong Pool, or however you want to put it. But certainly, we can find a more effective way to utilize that pool and really restore it to its original luster. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Amelia, you have 30 seconds to rebut.
Again, the fee that is charged, it is a bargain. I agree with Mark, and that's where I think we differ. I differ with Mr. Castellone, because every little bit helps, and anything to release the tax burden on Cranston families, and that does help in any way, a little bit at a time. It does help.
Thank you very much, Amelia. We've reached the end of the moderated portion of our evening. We're now going to turn the questions over to the audience.